Shadcn UI has finally made its way to React Native, and in this video, we're going to talk all about it. Let's get started.
So that was a f***ing lie.
Well, not quite. Let me show you why. Introducing React Native Reusable. Man, this is something I wish I stumbled across a lot sooner. Like Shadcn, it's not a library and it doesn't need to be installed.
What do you mean by that?
I feel like a lot of people are sleeping on this. As you can see, it says Universal Shadcn UI for React Native. Crafted with Native Win version 4 and accessibility in mind, React Native Reusable is open source, offering a foundation for developing your own high-quality component library.
Oh my!
Now, I'm going to assume you already heard of Shadcn. That's why you clicked on this video. But for those that are unfamiliar or have heard the term or heard in passing when talking to your other developer friends that you surround yourself with and whatnot, if you're unfamiliar with the project, I highly encourage you guys to check out this blog called The Anatomy of Shadcn UI. I'll link this in the description below. So with that said, let's go ahead and dive into some of the components. So let's kind of take a look at an example here. So if we look at the code, we can see that we can either copy all of this code and import it into our current project or a new project. Here's the manual walkthrough. Preferably, I like to use the CLI. It's just a lot easier to work with and use, and all you have to do is just run this command and this entire component is in your project. So if there's reasons for you to use the manual, go ahead and do it, but if you can use the CLI, just use the CLI. But yeah, let's take a look at what the component looks like. So this is the component here. If I hit the back button, we can see another demo component, and it has the look and feel of Shadcn UI. But again, this is all for React Native, which is super cool. Let's take a look at some of the other components. I know cards is a huge thing. Look at that. Looks exactly and feels almost exactly the same as Shadcn UI. And I wish I stumbled across this a lot sooner. I would have used it for the current project that I'm working on right now. With that said, what I'd like to do the rest of the video is just do a quick walkthrough on getting this all set up in a project and seeing how easy it is to get up and running with React Native Reusable. All right, so let's go ahead and get this project up and running. So what I plan on doing is I plan on installing the project first with NPM, and then I also plan on doing the same exact setup with PNPM. There are some differences between these two. There's an initial error that you're going to have to resolve if you decide to use PNPM, and we'll walk through that in this video as well. But for the first half of this, we're just going to go ahead and install everything using NPM. Yarn, the setup is exactly the same as NPM. With that said, let's get started. Be sure to select the initial setup tab. Scroll down to number 1 under installation. The first thing we're going to do is copy this link to clone the repository. I already have my terminal set up. I created a folder in some of my personal projects. I just called that folder YouTube. And all I'm going to do is paste that link directly into my terminal to clone the project in my newly created YouTube folder. We should now see this inside of our folder if I run our list command. There it is. If I switch back to setup instructions, the second thing we're going to do is we're going to copy the starter base project that lives inside of the original repository. And then we're also going to give it a name. And I'll show you what that looks like. So copy that link, switch back over to your terminal, paste that in there, hit enter. So you can see our first list only had a single item. If I do an ls, we can now see that newly created folder in our YouTube folder. All this is doing is grabbing the starter base project that lives inside of our React Native Reusable, and allows us to kind of start with a fresh project. Super convenient. Let's switch back to the instructions. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this right here. And all this is saying is that we're going to change directory into our project and install once we change directory. This will now install all of the project dependencies, and from there we should be able to run our emulator and see the project up and running. All right, so it looks like the installation was complete. Be sure that you're in your project. So to double check, I already have a path that tells me that I'm in my project, but if you want to double check to make sure that you are, you just run the ls command and you should see the entire project inside your terminal. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and clear my terminal and then open the open VS Code with the code dot command, and we should see the project here. There it is. So now I want to run the emulator. If I go back to the setup instructions, all that I have to do now is run npm run iOS, which I will do. There we go. So once this is done building, we should be able to see the first component, the default components or default screen for React Native Reusable. There we go. So we have everything working. If I click on this update, we can see that the progress bar does update, which is really cool. And then we also have the light and dark mode set up as well. So now I'm going to switch over to installing the project with PNPM. If you want to skip that, feel free. There's timestamps below, kind of going over how to install the Accordion component to this screen and how easy it is to set up. So feel free to skip over. But if you want to use PNPM for the project, feel free to stick around. So let's get this closed. And so now we're going to start the installation for PNPM. Just like the first setup, because you already have the project cloned, all we have to do is create the project. If you haven't done so already, we're gonna throw that into. Let's make sure I'm out of my old directory. We'll double check. Okay, so we have our first project in there. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to create another project, but we'll say this is going to be my project 2. Then I'm going to clear the terminal just so it's easier to see everything. I'm going to run a list command. You can see that the first one that we installed was with npm. The second one is going to be with PNPM. So if I go back to the documents and I copy this command here for the PNPM, one thing I would like to note, we'll handle this in this video, but we're going to run into an issue when using PNPM. So feel free to read through how this workaround works, but I'm basically just going to go ahead and implement this directly. So let's go ahead and do that. First thing I'm going to do is copy that command. That command was on our initial setup. Under PNPM, we're going to cd into the project and then run the installation command. So in our case, because we're using project 2, I'm going to make sure that I select project 2 and then install all of the dependencies. Personally, I would prefer to use PNPM. There's a little extra work involved, but I think overall it's just going to be a lot faster. All right, let's go ahead and get this up and running. So I'm going to clear my terminal just so we have a clear slate here. And I'm going to run the start command for iOS. And what I plan on doing here first, before doing that, just kind of closing out the tabs. To close out the tab for the app, all you have to do is double click the home icon, and then whatever apps you have open will immediately pop up, and you can just swipe up to get rid of it. Now, let's go ahead and get that up and running. So initially it's going to build. As it builds, we'll run into this first error here. To handle this, all we have to do is go into our project. So I'm just going to close down our project for now. I'm going to cd into our project here, and I'm going to create a npm rc file. So a .npm rc. And what I'm going to do next, I'm going to paste in the command that will allow us to fix the error. So that command would be this right here. Let me just make sure we get rid of that. In the documentation, it only mentions to list this. So that's what we will do. Again, I'm going to close this out before rerunning the app. Whoops. There we go. And rerun the app with PNPM iOS. We still get an error here. So let's see how we can resolve this. So in this case, we do have everything saved. I will also put in the other command that I had at the bottom, which is the enable pre-post scripts. I'll add links to what both of these two items do in the description below, but I believe this will actually fix our error. And if it doesn't, I think all we would have to do is make sure cache is also removed, because I think we might be running into that as well. So yeah, let's go ahead and do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the project, and I'm going to remove the expo folder. You can also do this from the CLI as well, but just to make it easier for this demo, I'm going to go ahead and remove both node modules and the expo folder, and we're going to rebuild everything. So we'll do an install. So PNPM install. Oops, there we go. And then we're going to rerun it with PNPM iOS, and that should fix our issue. And there we go. We can see that everything's working. We can see light and dark mode works. So that's it for the installation for PNPM. The next thing that we're going to do is implement one of the components onto this screen. In this case, I would say let's go ahead and do the accordion. The accordion will be pretty straightforward. So what I'm going to do first is click on the accordions tab under the components. I'm going to copy this command here. I'm going to go into my terminal, and I'm going to be sure to create a new terminal window in that same project directory. I'm going to paste the command in there, and I'm going to hit enter. It's going to ask you a bunch of questions. Feel free to customize this however you would like, but to keep things simple, I'm just going to say yes to everything. All right, there we go. So it should be in our project, and we can double check that by going into components, UI, and we can see the accordion in there. I probably should have shown that this wasn't in here initially, but if you go back, if you end up going through the original project that you already have in your folder, and you look into the starter base, this component wouldn't be there. But in this case, all I'm going to do now is use the name of the component, which is called accordion. Let's actually do this to keep things consistent. So I'm going to grab all of this right here. Let's grab this right here. And I'm going to go into our app within VS Code. We're going to select index because that's where our card lives. And what I want to do is I want to put the accordion right below the card here. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to make sure that I put it right below the card, paste that in there. We're going to get all these errors, so be sure to import all of the proper components. And they should automatically pop up. I'm using this. Okay, that's already good. I'm using the IntelliSense to get most of this all set up so I don't have to manually import that. But we can see that if you do want to just copy and paste all those components from your components folder, feel free to do that. But once we're done there, we can verify that all of this is set up. We're not getting any errors. Be sure to save your file. And then when we go back to the application, we can see that we already have our component. Easy enough. Awesome. Well, that's pretty much it, guys. Just wanted to quickly demo and walk through React Native Reusable. I highly suggest it if you are considering using another component library. Again, this is not a library, which is really cool. It's just a way for you to create components quickly, and you have full control over it. But if you're planning on using something similar, definitely consider this project. Check it out. If you have used this before, let me know in the comments what your thoughts are, what problems you ran into, and if you even recommend it. But yeah, with that said, feel free, like, subscribe this video, share it with a friend if you find this useful, and until the next video.